Hey Reddit, what's your UFO sighting? The first one. I was 15 years old and on my way home from my ex-girlfriend's house. It was 3 a.m. and I was taking my time leisurely pedaling down a rather dark street. Suddenly, but not unusually, I hear a loud shriek. The shriek was just a bat hanging around among the treetops, but what I saw then changed my perspective of the world I live in. At the same moment I hear the shriek, I look up towards the direction of it, and I see a very large, circular object shoot across the sky at a phenomenal speed. I almost fell off my bike, stopped, stared at the sky for a few more minutes, and then went around my way thinking, what the heck did I just see? Was that real? I'm positive that what I saw was no illusion. The scariest thing was, though, the way this vehicle looked and sounded. It could have been no more than 100 feet above the modest suburban treetops. It radiated a strange light that was not an identifiable color, but it was every color at once. It made no sound, no whistle, no hum, nothing. If I had not heard the bat, I would never have seen this. A commenter responds, it's funny how often it is something unexpected and random that causes you to spot them. It's as if they have 99% accurate prediction for the eye lines of every single human and travel in the space in between, but once in a while, something random causes them to get spotted. Story number 2. About 90 or 91, while attending college in Phoenix, it was a clear night with a full moon, very temperate, and I decided to take a drive. I ended up northwest of town in some fields, out somewhere close to Luke Air Force Base. It was about 2 or 3 a.m. before I had a cell phone or GPS, so I didn't know exactly where I was. All I knew is that I could see the city lights glowing behind me. Out of nowhere, there's this really bright white light off in the distance. It was the kind of light that a modern white LED would put out, but only much, much brighter. At first I thought it was a crop duster or something, but then it started moving slowly in the shape of a stretched out figure 8 on its side. I took a few turns to follow the road and see if I could get closer, and then the weird stuff started. The motion of the light sped up considerably, almost to the point the figure 8 was very clear. I noted that it was extremely accurate in its motion. My car's headlights started to go dim and flicker, but I had alternator problems in the past, so I thought I was just having more bad luck. I didn't have a radio, so I don't know if I was getting any kind of radio interference for anything. A few minutes go by, and I'm still watching the light. It's speeding up, its motion even more, and I'm trying to stay on the road. Then the car just dies, as if I turned the ignition off. Luckily, I had my analog multimeter with me that we use for electronics labs, so I rummage through the moonlit darkness and dig that out to see if I have any voltage on my car battery. Nothing. No movement on the gauge that I could see. I had some lengths of hookup wire, so I figured I'd test for a spark, and again, nothing. Now I'm getting worried that I wouldn't make it back to the city. I focus back on the light, and it's moving at an insane speed, not like anything I've ever seen, even to this day. And just when I think it couldn't get any weirder, it shoots straight up into the sky and disappears from view. A few moments later, my headlights produce light again, and my hairs stand up on end. They are standing up on end as I am typing this out. I head back to the city as fast as I can, with my adrenaline going full steam. I have an electronics background, and I still to this day question everything we know about electrical theory and the possibility of what's out there. Plus, I haven't told many people about this, up until now. And yes, I was in Tempe, Arizona when the famous flares appeared west of Phoenix, and I witnessed them through binoculars, but I can't disprove they were or weren't flares. This sighting, on the other hand, really freaked me out. Number 3, this story comes from my dad. Back when he was living in Iran, he was laying down on a grassy field with his brother, just watching the sky. I guess there was nothing better to do 30 years ago. Anyways, they see a light in the sky moving at a normal pace, and they don't think anything of it until it stops for a few minutes. He told me that they thought it was a helicopter until, out of nowhere, it shot across the whole sky in a speed not possible by any modern aircraft. It did so in a matter of less than a couple of seconds. I have no reason whatsoever to believe my dad was lying to me. Story number 4. My grandfather, on his deathbed, told my father and I about a sighting he had in the Navy when he was deployed around Guam. He said he saw something large and glowing in the sky that was moving at very high speeds, before finally all of the lights vanished. He said he wasn't the only person on his ship to see it, although he wasn't sure there was an investigation. I always thought his story was especially interesting because, if true, it was before the huge increase of UFO sightings and the frenzy surrounding them, also before technology reached the point where it could easily be confused for an alien craft with things like advanced drones, etc. Story number 5. This past June, 3 of my friends and I were wandering off from a party to purchase some snackables at a local grocer. We settled on berries. On the way back to the house, we all lay down in a soybean field to eat, laugh, and stargaze. After about 30 minutes of staring up, laying on the ground, all of us start to feel a bit uneasy. One after the other, we realize we're not staring up at stars, but something about 100 feet above us, a triangular outline of 5 lights per side. It starts to move away, silently, at which point it becomes obvious that it is a full black craft. One of us says, "Oh my God, do you guys see this?" We all agree on seeing it, and we watch it accelerate, roughly southwest until it is out of sight. We talked about it for a while and compared its movement to a few planes of the sky, determined that it was moving 3 to 4 times the speed of a commercial aircraft. Since the field is near the airport, we'd see low-flying planes as well, and we could compare the speeds. But it was totally silent. They all refused to discuss it now. Too long, didn't read, spotted a massive airship with 3 other people that was basically invisible until it began to move. And let's not forget about the berries. A commenter asks, "So they refuse to talk about it now? What exactly do they say when you bring up the subject?" Well, they just say, "Didn't happen," jokingly, but they won't say anything else. Story number 5, and I think this is the second number 5 in a row. Oops, oh well. I was driving down the interstate with my friend during the day when we saw a bright light. It was too bright to be a star or a plane, so we kept watching it, and the road, of course. All of a sudden, the thing took a sharp turn and disappeared straight up into the sky. A commenter responds, "Not that I'm a UFO person, but the sharp 90-degree turns do seem to be a pretty consistent, inexplicable feature of a lot of these stories. That's so weird." The poster responds, "We actually felt the same way. We had never seen anything able to take such a sharp turn before, and then when it disappeared completely, like we watched it get smaller and smaller as it got higher, we were just like, what the hell was that?" Story number 6. My mother's story. Sometime in the late 50s or early 60s, she was in her early teens, in Ecuador, she was staying over at a friend's house. The house was in the countryside, an estate with a large open ranch land. After dinner, my mother, her friend, and her friend's parents went out on the porch to relax, drink coffee, smoke, and then they saw a bright light in the distance, moving slowly and occasionally hovering above the treetops of an orchard nearby. She and her friend climbed up on a brick wall to get a better glimpse. As they did, the light came closer and suddenly shined an intense beam of light on them. After a moment, just as suddenly, the light launched itself directly into the sky and out of sight. That story has terrified me since I was a child. Story number 7. When I was an air traffic controller, I was in the tower one morning at Randolph Air Force Base, Texas, and it was maybe a half hour after the break of day. The other controller was taking a nap, as there were no planes in the sky at that time of the morning. Something caught my eye, and I looked up and I saw this metallic object flying very fast over the tower. I could not make out what it was, I just knew that it wasn't a plane. I called down to radar and asked them if they saw anything on their scopes, and they said no. I have no idea what it could have been. Satellites do not fly that low or that fast. Oh well, I know they're out there somewhere. Story number 8. I was about 12, living in the San Fernando Valley in Los Angeles. I was outside one night, watching the sky and generally screwing around. I caught a glimpse of something and turned towards it. What I saw is difficult to describe, but it looked like about 6 stars, which is what I thought they were at first, all the same intensity and color, moving across the sky in sort of a vague V shape, definitely at an obtuse angle of maybe 130 degrees or so. Whatever it was, shot across the sky relatively quickly. I watched until it was out of view, and then I stood stupefied for a moment. I never could tell how high up I thought it was. Story number 9. A few years ago, I was in Mexico traveling on a night coach somewhere between Mexico City and Guadalajara. We were crossing the plains, and the terrain was featureless and boring even in the light. In the moonless dark of night, there was literally nothing to see. I fell into an uneasy sleep, upright in the seat. Around 2 in the morning, I woke. Freezing, I was the only passenger awake. Bleary-eyed and sleepy, I made a blanket from my jacket and turned to resting my face against the window. As I did, I happened to look through the glass and I saw something I thought I would never see. 20 miles from the road, as the driver continued oblivious, hovered an object of staggering scale and beauty, sitting there stationary in the sky. The thing hung there in the night, made visible only by the lights that ran up and down along its length, multicolored strings of yellow, red, blues and greens, milky pinks and fiery oranges. It was a rainbow. The lights they formed were random and organic, certainly not the shape of any aircraft, and anyway, much too big, miles and miles long. My heart began to race as I realized the significance of what I was seeing. We are not alone. As I turned to wake my traveling companion, something happened. I realized I'd made a mistake. I had mistaken a town on a hill for something out of Star Wars. Story number 10. I was driving home from my bartender job, so at like 3 in the morning. I was tired and I couldn't stop thinking about my bed. Come to think of it, I really shouldn't have been driving feeling like that. It was about a 45-minute drive. About 15 minutes into it, there was a low-flying aircraft of some type that was making a weird grinding noise, a really loud noise that I felt in my bones. It was such a strange experience. I remember thinking there must be something really wrong with that plane, mechanical problems or something. The next thing I remember, I was driving along a lake near my house. There was a strange light on the lake. It was a weird orange light I had never seen before. It turned out it was the sunrise. What the hell? How is the sun rising right now? But it was 6 in the morning. I lost about 3 hours. I was still dead tired, though. I was home a few minutes later, and I crashed until the evening. The next day, I remembered and looked up about the plane incident on the news and all the newspapers. There was no plane crashes or anything I could find. Some of my friends said that it might have been a drug smuggling plane, but I really can't imagine what a drug smuggling plane was doing in suburban Chicago. So anyway, it still really freaks me out over a decade later. Number 11, I flew down to San Francisco to visit some friends. And the night of my arrival, we got together and went up to the top of this hill in Marin County, around the Tiburon area, overlooking the bay. We noticed something flying over the bay. All we could see was a light, but we noticed that it didn't have the flashing light an airplane has, nor did it have the red and green running lights. It seemed to be flying very low and slow, but we concluded it was not a helicopter. It was just one bright light, moving very slowly over the water. We speculated on what it would be, but nobody got too freaked out about it. Nobody said, UFO! And we lost interest in favor of all the other sights and lights to see. The next day, on the news on TV, it was a huge headline story. Hundreds of people saw a mysterious light over the bay. It was a big deal to a lot of people, evidently. A couple of weeks later, I was riding my motorcycle. It was a very quiet bike, and I was driving slowly through a parking lot in San Rafael when I heard a strange sound, kind of like a chainsaw, except it seemed to be moving around above me. I looked up and I saw an ultralight aircraft head towards a vacant lot and land. I decided to check it out. I drove over and admired the aircraft and noticed a large headlight on one of the wings. I mentioned the UFO to the pilot, and he rolled his eyes and said that it was illegal to fly it over the bay. Wink, wink, nod, nod. Case closed. Number 12. My first and only sighting was 2 years ago on a camping trip at Hamlin State Park in New York. Myself and 3 other friends were walking around the campsites and ended up in the playground area, just messing around. Someone spotted a steady moving light in the sky. It was very, very distant. We at first dismissed it as a satellite or something, but it changed directions and started coming back. It stopped directly above us, and then the light got extremely bright. Bright enough where we had to squint our eyes looking directly at it. All 4 of us kept frantically asking each other, "Oh my God, guys, are you seeing this?" A short time later, the light got dim again and briskly traveled across the sky out of sight. I still have no idea what it could have been, but it certainly makes for a good experience. Story number 13. This was a long time ago, but when I was a kid, my family and I were out on the front lawn playing with a crummy telescope I got for my birthday. We saw something zipping across the sky, which slowed for several moments. I immediately tried to see in my telescope when it resumed speed. I only managed to accidentally get a split-second view of it. It was shaped like a hockey puck. Decades later, we still tell this story. And I have to wonder if this was in Canada, because if so, they probably were just flying hockey pucks. Story number 14. Probably something explainable, but we never looked into it. Was out talking with some friends, and we looked up and saw how dark it was in the sky. Saw a moving light across the sky, not too fast. Looked like a lot of the plane's lights, but didn't flash, and was only one single light. We continued to stare because we were confused. The lights were not flashing like all the other planes. We then see it suddenly slow down to almost a complete stop, but not noticeably moving, and start to disappear until we could not see it anymore. I like to believe that it was a UFO. I don't know how Unin can believe there is not life outside Earth. Story number 15. A friend of mine in the Navy mentioned an instance where both he and his commanding officer were on the deck of a carrier early in the morning. They both saw 3 lights fly at ridiculous speeds, stop and hover over them, and then take off in opposing directions. The commanding officer looked over at my friend, who was incredulous, and said, "Yeah, you see things out here that nobody would believe. Everyone that walks on the deck at night, at some point, sees something unexplainable." Story 16. I was coming down from a mushroom trip, 3 grams, and was on the porch, laying back watching the sunrise while smoking a J and eating some fruit and water. I look up and see a flock of birds flying overhead. I thought about how cool it would be to have the freedom that personal flight would give you. As I am thinking this, I see an outline of a round disc-like object, kind of how you see the Predator in cloak mode. When I am in this state, I feel that I have an insanely focused attention span. I observe details I normally do not see. For example, I was watching different layers of clouds move at different speeds since it was a windy morning. As soon as I noticed this pattern take shape, I saw more and more. One larger and more intricate than the others lost its cloaking while passing over me, and what I saw made me want to drop my water. From underneath, I saw what looked like a giant stone disc with intricate designs and obvious hieroglyphics etched into it. It looked like something that belonged in the desert along with the pyramids. I do not know if it made any sounds. I kind of lost touch with reality, being so focused on what I was seeing. It felt like it short-circuited my brain. I have no idea of the size, and I do not really know how high up it was. After about 10 minutes, I didn't see it anymore, but I can't describe the feeling that came with thinking that I saw whatever I saw. I felt touched. I have seen some crazy and unbelievable things, but this really caught me off guard. Real or not, it was one of the coolest and most amazing things I have seen to date. Number 17. 2 nights ago, I'm laying in my room reading when the power went out. I see flashing lights outside and thinking maybe it's the power company with the power problem, but my cat starts growling, and when I open the blinds, there's only these weird twinkling lights out on the street attached to nothing, just floating there. What's weird is I can't remember what happened next at all. They were just gone. Commenter asks, "So after seeing the lights, you had sort of a blank spot in your memory? That's really creepy." The poster responds, "Yeah, I remember seeing the lights and I think they were right outside my house and then nothing. I can't remember seeing them depart or remember watching them shut off or anything like that. I don't keep a clock in my room, so I can't say if any time was lost, but I don't think anything sinister happened. Maybe I was just so shocked at what I saw that it didn't register." Number 18. I was sitting in my bedroom. I rubbed my eyes, and then when I opened them, I found myself in a sterile white room. I was surrounded by several people. They had completely black eyes. They told me that I was being used for an experiment. I wasn't that scared, but I was more like, what the heck? Then they injected something in my arm. I woke up in bed. Well, I didn't really wake up. I felt groggy and tired. But I knew what happened was not a dream, though it was weird. When I tell people that they say it was a dream, but it was not a dream, it felt real. No, it really was real. Anyway, after that happened, I discovered that my memory was sharply enhanced and that I could do all sorts of things. I learned another language in a week. It was good for a while. I took an IQ test and I was off the charts. But then later my intelligence decreased and I became normal. Story number 19. I was out stargazing. I was spying on a teenage neighbor. Well, I was a teenager then too, so it's okay, don't worry. I looked at a satellite, or what I thought was a satellite moving across the sky, but it was about 3 times faster, and there was another dot that kept moving in and away from it, not just at a close distance. It would go out far and then come back as it was traveling alongside the first light. There is nothing I can think of that would even come close to explaining what that was. Not saying it was definitely aliens, but it was definitely unidentified. Story 20. When I was 10 or 11, I was sleeping at my grandfather's house for some reason, in what used to be my mother's bedroom when she was a child. In this bedroom, there is a large window opposite the bed, overlooking an inlet of the Chesapeake Bay. From the bedroom to the shore opposite the inlet, there's probably about a mile of water, and lots of houses on the other side. I lay in the bed looking out over the water, and I was unable to sleep. As I watched, I noticed a small light rising up over the horizon from behind one of the houses opposite the bay. I thought it was an airplane, but it caught my interest and I kept my eye on it. Over the next 30 minutes or so, the light rose up over the treetops and houses and began to cross the bay slowly but deliberately until it was right outside the window, though it was high in the air. As it got closer, it didn't seem to get larger, but it really did get brighter. It had no discernible shape. It was not an orb, but a point of light. It did not blink or flash, was too low and small and slow to be an airplane, and made no sound that I could hear. It passed over the room I was in, and I never saw it again. Everyone in my family thinks I'm crazy when I tell them this story. Number 21. Last year, I'm in Cardiff, Wales, UK, if that makes any difference. I'm sitting in my room, and out the window, just to my right, it's evening time, I see a white or pinkish glowing ball or streak thing dart across the sky. It was quite close, not distant at all, below the cloud line, and I'm guessing about a quarter of a mile from me. It shot across the sky for about 1.5 seconds and then just disappeared. It was most certainly not a firework or an aircraft or anything else like that. The way it moved was a constant speed, not a fast streak, if you get what I mean. Story 22. A few days ago, on New Year's Day in South Florida, a bunch of us were at a friend's house in the late afternoon, out in his front yard, when I saw something coming in the distance. It appeared to be a large circular object, bright, fuzzy orange, with a brighter center that was almost a glowing yellow, like a fireball. It went directly overhead, moving at a steady speed, and I yelled to everyone else to come out of the house. They did, and we watched the thing disappear over the top of the neighbor's house. We were talking excitingly about it when another one appeared on the opposite side of the sky, went over us at the same speed as the first one, and disappeared. We still have no idea what it was. Some are saying it was a meteor, but those don't move at a slow, steady speed. There was no sound to it, so it was impossible to tell if they were a mile up or 100 miles. Damnedest thing I've ever seen. A commenter responds, "Meteors can move at a steady, slow speed, generally if they're very high up in the sky, but yours sounds really unusual, especially if you saw 2 identical things. Any reason you don't think it was the same object passing overhead twice?" The poster responds, "In the pictures I've seen of meteors, they're leaving a trail, but these were perfectly spherical. One followed the other by no more than 1.5 minutes, so I don't see how they could have been the same one. I would totally doubt this experience and doubt what I saw if it were not for a bunch of other people who saw it too." And that's all the stories that we have for today. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this, it would really help me out if you could like and subscribe.